The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the stations or the advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of American Average Music.
This is not America. Sha-la-la-la-la. Little piece of you, the little beats in me will
The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for you. Walk on with my hand now, and wondering what dress to wear now.
So, Dion is praying for someone, and we all know Nancy Pelosi says a little prayer every day before she wakes up and puts on her makeup, or was it
She
Botox?
Well, she says she does.
Yes, she does, of course, because she's a Catholic.
Because she's Catholic.
And
you know.
she loves everybody.
Catholics don't hate.
No, they never do.
All you have to do is look at Belfast.
Yes. And, or even as we, that's Bolivia is not really Catholic, but it's Christian, evangelical Christians slaughtering Indians and so on.
But sectarian strife,
yes.
that never happens.
And Nancy is also self-identified as a Shabbos goy. Do you know what that is?
Is she?
You know what that is?
I've never described her quite like that, but no, tell us what.
That's what she describes herself as. Yeah, it's in you can look it up on the internet. It's in a press conference. Her father was one of the biggest Zionists. He was in Congress in the 40s.
That was when they were in Baltimore, was it?
And he was also mayor of Baltimore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she says every week she attended a bris. There was just so many of them. But she is obviously a Catholic, and she loves the Zionist Jews, and we know that because she supports Israel 100%. She's one of those no daylights between U.S. and Israel, which is causing a good deal of the problems in the world. But she decided to take down Donald Trump, and after she prays for him, she's going to go ahead and indict him on the
because she doesn't
impeachment.
Hate him.
Yes.
Because she doesn't hate him.
Yeah.
The display is really something. I mean, it
Yes.
is really interesting to watch all of these things. And I mentioned last week on the show that I think we should all just be a little bit more lighthearted about the whole thing because it's not going anywhere anyway.
No.
And so we should just enjoy it for the entertainment value alone, not take it too seriously.
Yeah. And, that's certainly true, but it also does set a bad precedent, and who knows where that precedent will go, because these people in Congress, once they, sniff of power, they're very, very reluctant to give it up. And there's already talk about starting a new impeachment after Trump is reelected.
Well, here's what we need to do to rectify that, and that is we just never let them win again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we have to keep them out, and we have to get our kids out of school. And, the military has admitted that they and the deep state, the government, lied about the Afghanistan wars. They didn't admit it. The Washington Post uncovered the fact through the Freedom of Information Act, and they published it as sort of kind of like a new Pentagon Papers, that they have lied about Afghanistan through their teeth for 18 years.
Wasn't that shocking?
Yes.
Could you believe that your eyes and ears when you saw that story develop? Imagine that. They were lying to us for 20 years.
And, the American people, they don't like Congress. The approval rating is way down. The president hovers around 50%, 40, 50%. But the military and the police, they really like those two entities. And I wonder if this will change that in any way, knowing that the military lies about a war that we've been in for 18 years. I wonder if that will penetrate into the American psyche.
I think it'll have less effect than the Pentagon Papers.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that one, there was an urgency about anti-communist concerns there. In Afghanistan, it was more of a war of choice. It was perceived that way.
Right. I mean, we had after we supposedly took out bin Laden, and I ran for Congress that year after 9/11, and as a Libertarian Party member, and I shocked people by saying I wasn't for even that initial incursion. I thought, like Ron Paul said, the Constitution gives you other means, letters of marque and reprisal, sending in special ops or even mercenaries.
Which is what we should have done.
To get bin Laden.
I'm convinced that Ron Paul's solution there was the right one.
Exactly.
We should have sent the troops to Mexico.
Well, at least to the border, maybe.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it morphed, as these things go, the mission, they call it mission creep, but in this case, the mission leapt and bound by leaps and bounds, and but we still didn't know what we were doing.
And where are we now? About $1 trillion there?
Oh, yeah.
So
$1 trillion, all kinds of debts, all kinds of ill will.
Yeah, not to mention the blood.
Yep, and Saudi just killed several people on the Lend-Lease program to train with American soldiers.
The Lend-Lease program. What happened with that Corpus Christi event this morning?
I don't know.
Sort of a lockdown?
You're the only one that's mentioned it.
Yeah, there was some sort of lockdown there, and then there was nothing about it. So
right.
I don't know what that was.
So,
but that's another aspect, a little fine-tuning of globalism, bringing foreign soldiers in to train with us.
Yes.
Isn't that reprehensible, I think?
Yeah, and the thing is, his manifesto said he did not do it because he hated our freedom. He did it because we're over there killing Muslims. And he was outraged by that. But, of course, when I listen to the politicians on the cable news, it's all about he hates our freedoms. That's why he killed them. Mm-hmm. They simply will not admit that the globalist enterprise is coming to an end, hopefully, at least winding down somewhat. And
the trend is in our favor.
I think so.
Yeah.
But how long it will take, we don't know.
Oh, it could take. And look how long it took for us to get into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've said for many years that it will take at least as long to get out of it as we got into it. So,
And so the controversy continues after the break.
Destination Midtown. Experience the difference. Reno's premier shopping extravaganza. Everything imaginable and more. Midtown matters.
This is Oliver X. Join me and the superstar Janez Carter weekday mornings from 8 to 9 on the Reno Todd Tonight Show on America Matters Media.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Reno Freedom Talk Radio, Talking Truth to Power. This is your host, Brennan Trainer, and along with me every week is my co-host, Leland Faegre, and we're here to talk about the news. Now, before we get into the Horowitz, I just wanted to say that listening to Nancy Pelosi speak, I mean, she can barely get out a sentence, and she can barely construct a grammatical phrase, and I was thinking, what would happen if there was a debate between Pelosi and Biden? It would be like Chewbacca debating 3CPO.
Well, that's why you're an award-winning writer.
Yeah, I know.
I tell you, that really was something to observe, and I think it's because they're nervous. They're not confident.
No.
And that can distort your ability to communicate well, I think. At least in her case, I mean, this is something that has been sort of ongoing. I don't believe this is just a sudden realization that we've been watching here. And I think I remember seeing stories on this subject going back maybe 2-3 years ago on the way she delivers communication.
Yes, yeah. So at any rate, we had the Inspector General testimony this morning, and we obviously couldn't catch all of it. Maybe some of you are have one eye on the TV and one ear on the show, watching it today.
Yeah, hopefully.
But, yes, but that's
split screen.
Yes.
By the way, that's what MSNBC did while Lindsey Graham gave his opening remarks. They split the screen, and then they had a talking head talking over him, so nobody could hear what he had to say. Yeah. CNN didn't even cover it.
No, CNN cut out all the Republicans and only showed the Democrats.
Yeah, they're really concerned about this. It's very clear that they're very nervous about the outcome here, and they don't have much in the way of too many options anyway to advance their agenda. Not that they have one, but.
Yeah, so they keep.
That's why I enjoy it so enormously to watch this, because it really is revealing as to how bereft of a platform they have to sell to the American people.
Right, and the thing is that there is much more to this than meets the eye. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Moon of Alabama blog. That it's run by a German military analyst. He calls himself B, just the initial B for Bernard. And
it's probably his code name in the intelligence service.
It's very prescient blog. And he thinks that this is a case of parallel construction. If any of you have not heard about that phrase, it's when an upper-level federal agency, it's used mostly for criminal cases, an upper-level federal agency is doing surveillance, and then they pass the results of that surveillance to the police, and the police never admit to the judge where they got the initial surveillance to open their case. Mm-hmm. And so he thinks...
That would explain the predicate, the lack of a predicate.
Right. And that would also explain that the connection of Brennan and the CIA. He points out that he believes that Brennan contacted British intelligence before this case was opened, and they to spy on Trump. And then they head of British intelligence flew to Washington and had a head-to-head with Brennan. And then after
Must have been with Barack Obama as well.
Yeah.
Had to have been.
Well, you would think he would be in the loop.
Somehow, yeah.
Yeah. And then from that predicate, they established the parallel case without informing anybody that it was actually started by the CIA, not the FBI. And we'll see if Attorney General Barr and Bull Durham can uncover some of that.
Mm-hmm. And they did not hesitate to speak upon the release of the IG report on Monday, did they?
Oh, yes.
I mean, literally within minutes.
Within minutes, yes.
They were out with their take on it because they did not want the narrative that was about to be promulgated throughout the media to be the one that makes the case for or against the president's case against the deep state.
Well, what the Dems are latching onto is Horowitz said there was no bias in the opening of the investigation. But
right.
All you have to do to open an investigation, apparently, with the FBI is articulate a reasonable premise or suspicion. That's all.
Very low
bar. So the fact that there was no bias, meaning nobody stepped up and said he was biased when he did that, or there was no smoking gun to say anybody was biased, no documents or anything.
But in Horowitz's testimony this morning,
he had no evidence.
He made it clear that beyond that,
right,
once it got to the FISA sequence of the chronology, that it got a little more tough, a little difficult to sustain the argument that there wasn't anything mischievous going on here.
Exactly, and that's why CNN is cutting out that testimony.
Yeah, there's nothing there for CNN. I don't see why they would go to the testimony. Actually, I don't see it benefiting them. And what we saw this morning, I mean, this afternoon is really where the sparks are going to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, you got all those guys lined up: Mike Lee, Ted Cruz. I mean, heaven help them.
I think Mike Lee has already been given his 5 minutes.
Has he?
Yeah, and he's been tearing it up pretty good, according to what I've heard. So, again, this is only the opening round.
Yeah. We're just getting started here.
Yeah, in the spring and the fall, there will be more with the in the spring or the early summer, hopefully. The Barr-Durham report will be out.
Anticipation is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
I never like to rush my way through the seasons, but man, I'm kind of looking forward to late spring.
So in other related news, Sergei Lavrov came to Washington. I like Sergei Lavrov.
I do too.
He reminds me of a nice Boris Karloff.
I'd have lunch with him.
Yeah, I would too. Mm-hmm. He has a very dry wit, and you can't fault what he and Putin did in Syria. I mean, they pulled off a major diplomatic victory in Syria by thwarting the ZOG, the New World Order's designs on that unfortunate country. And, Russia right now is bringing aid to Raqqa, which is the city that was devastated by the Syrian Democratic Forces, in other words, the Kurds, and the U.S. bombs.
Patch up the damage that we did.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing.
But, when we bombed a hospital, it was an error.
Of course
every time Russia bombed a hospital, it was deliberate. We know that.
They love bombing hospitals.
Yes. That's how they get their Orthodox Christian kicks out of that.
Yeah, it's part of that dynamic.
So anyway, he met with Mike Pompeo, and they were talking about a lot of things. They were talking about the nuclear treaties, which the U.S. Under Bolton has torn up, including the START Treaty, which is the most comprehensive, which is still in effect for about a year. But if they don't get cracking on it...
Is it that long? I thought it was only a month's away now.
No, I think it's about a year before it's finally terminated. But they have to get the negotiations going. It's not going to happen overnight. Now, Donald Trump at the... we didn't even get to talk about the NATO conference in...
That's right, huh?
Yeah, in England.
Because that happened on during our last show, basically.
Yeah. But Donald Trump let it drop that he and Putin were talking about, he said, eliminating nukes, but I don't think it goes that far. But he and Putin have been talking about nukes, but there's still no indication that from Pompeo that we're going to back off our Maximus stand, that we will not be constrained by any treaty anywhere. We will do whatever the heck we want to do. And, a voluntary agreement to stop the production of nuclear missiles that could destroy the world is really not, in my opinion, an entangling alliance that we have to avoid. And but anyway, what they also talk.
It's not what the framers had in mind.
No, of course they didn't have nuclear missiles back in those days, but still. But anyway, what they also talked about was the 2016 election, and here Lavrov insisted once again that Russia had nothing to do, did not interfere in the elections, and he offered to present the high-level documents between Russia and the U.S. around the time of the incident. Any documents that there were, he offered to reveal them if the U.S. would cooperate. And Pompeo, was kind of reticent. He said something about producing documents, but we'll see if anything comes out of that. But, even if, it's highly unlikely, well, first of all, the Internet Research Agency was a commercial clickbait operation. They weren't sowing discord. They were simply trying to
sell product,
hit different constituencies. Like with the Black Lives Matter, they hope to get black people to click on an ad, and with the Bernie, they hope to get the leftist Democrats to click on an ad, and with the Guns for Texas, they've tried to get the the Second Amendment people to click on an ad. And
Texans like guns?
Yeah, they had all different little themes, and they just wanted to make $25-50 a day off of these different memes that they put on Facebook by people clicking on them and then clicking on an ad.
So you're telling me that Texans like guns? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's.
Oh, okay.
So, but even if Russia hacked the DNC, which most people now think it was a download and not a hack, or most intelligent people, what they produced was in the public interest. The documents that were produced and that were given over to WikiLeaks by somebody, and Assange has said it was not a state, it was not Russia or a state actor, they were very important that American voters get to see them.
That's what it was all about.
Yes.
It was about free speech.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's hard to comprehend a more entangling difficulty for those of us who are trying to explain it, because the mass media is so powerful.
I know.
It's just... Anyway, stay with us.
Howdy, Shannon Lawson here. When my family wants real barbecue, it's chili, rib tips, and sweet potato fries. It's the Butcher's Kitchen Barbecue, 7689.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. This is Reno's and Nevada's Freedom Talk Radio. I'm your host, Brennan Trainer, and along with me is our co-host, Leland Faegre. And Iran has been in the news lately because of riots there that they seem to have, and every time
seem to have,
they have They had them a couple of years ago.
They do. I think these are more serious.
Yeah, and then every time that they happen, it's the imminent collapse of the country. You know, the country's going to go down, and Obama, remember, was excoriated by the right because when they had one of these riots when he was president, he did not jump into the fray and intervene, and So, but they are not nearly as bad as for the regime as it's made out to be.
But they have been given some significant headline attention lately, and some deaths have been reported as well.
So what happened in this case is that Iran had a certain amount of free gasoline that they rationed to all the people, and then after that rationing was done, then they had to pay for it. Well, they cut down on the amount of the free gasoline to about 60 liters a month per household, I believe, and they raised the price somewhat of the unfree amount above that, and that caused a protest. Now, what we've been told that the protests were against the Iranian government, and the Iranian government unleashed their military and killed. We've been getting all kinds of reports, thousands.
Yeah, there has been numbers like that quoted.
Yes.
Yeah,
but that's not quite the story, or it is the story, but it's not quite the reality. In fact, the people protested peacefully for a couple of days about the hikes, and there were legislatures that were wondering why it was done. It wasn't supposed to this soon. It wasn't supposed to happen until January, and there was legislation being entered into the Iranian parliament to stop the hike because it was premature or it wasn't done with due process or something. But then all of a sudden we found out why they did it, and then and Khomeini said this publicly, but we don't listen to him. He said what happened next was a series of violent protests. There were at least 500 banks attacked. There was armed insurgents. And these were not the Iranian people. These were the MEK. And if you don't know who the MEK, the Mutahidin Akadin or something. That's a pseudo-Marxist, pseudo-Islamist feminist cult that run now by a woman. Nobody knows what happened to her husband, but she's now in charge of it, and the MEK is the darling of the neocons. We know that Giuliani speaks at their meetings, and other figures in the administration.
Maybe he just went out of town for a few days.
Yes. So in this case, when these violent uprisings happened, they did kill some and arrested some, probably around 1,200 people.
Yeah, that was the number that I remember.
Yeah, and so it looks like it was a deliberate attempt to flush these people out. I mean, at least that is one alternative explanation for what has gone on. And, more to the point, the Iranian regime is not going to collapse. And despite all the suffering that we've imposed on it, Iran is now has friendly relations with most of the Gulf states, except the ones that are most aligned with us: Israel, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. They're the enemies of Iran, and they're not winning. they're not winning the war in Yemen either, of course. But the other states, Kuwait, Oman. Oman is an interesting little state. It rarely gets involved
They've got
militarily.
that Gulf there.
Yeah. And they have a large black population, and they're not as socially conservative as some of the other Muslim states. But Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar especially, and Turkey are now siding up with Iran, basically. They need Iran's oil. Qatar and Iran share a very large oil field. And also, Iran just made a major discovery of another oil deposit that increases their oil reserves.
Another
by
one?
Because
I remember about 2 months ago, I remember hearing about
maybe
one.
it was 2 months. Maybe it's the same one.
Okay. My God, that would really be efficient.
It increases their known reserves by 30%.
Right.
So maximum pressure is not working, and it's going to start to backfire.
Here's what I think we should do. We should entangle ourselves a little bit more closely with their destiny. That always works.
Oh yeah, well it's always double down.
Yeah, of course it does.
They never reverse course. So we the same thing is happening in Europe with the NATO event that we had recently, where Macron started off by saying NATO is brain dead, and then Trump. I was surprised at this, but Trump got all huffy and puffy.
I think he did it. He didn't do it for the reasons that I think were commonly held. I think he had his own reasons for doing it, but might have been for cover for Boris or somebody. I don't know what that was, but he didn't feel that way.
Well, let's not forget that this 2% military spending is. It's
a big deal.
But it's held. I mean, it's expected that most of that 2% will go to buy U.S. weapons.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and Donald is a big weapons dealer. That's basically his second job, is selling weapons.
Right.
So,
President/arms merchant.
Yes. And but the. NATO can't figure out which way it's going, and they also was held a meeting in Normandy, France, between Germany and Macron and Putin and Zelensky, and this was the first time that Putin and Zelensky met. Zelensky, the new president of the Ukraine, and the reports are that Putin was basically mentoring the young man through the process. And he got a few things, but the idea is that Germany and France brokered what's called the Minsk Agreement, which Minsk is the capital of Belarus, where they met, which would have a ceasefire in the Ukraine as far as the Donbass goes. The two provinces in southeastern Ukraine that are in rebellion, and they would. Hold elections, and they would grant cultural and some political autonomy to the Donbass, so they can continue to be assured they can speak Russian and teach Russian in the schools, and they would have some kind of political autonomy yet to be determined. And that is but the Poroshenko refused to implement these Minsk agreements, and they're trying to resurrect them now with Zelensky, and Macron and Merkel. They basically gave the idea lip service, but didn't come forward in any real forceful way. But Russia got a few things. Russia does not want, the main sticking point is the Ukraine wants to put their guards on the border, if under the Minsk agreement, and they right now it's a neutral border. They want to put their guards on the border, which Russia believes would lead to possible massacres of the Russian people, because their guards are going to be heavily neo-Nazi. They're going to be, which were the shock troops in the war against the Donbass. But the whole thing is just completely misunderstood, misinterpreted by our political class, and Russia is not aggressive in the Donbass. It's helping them out. It's sending some observers. It allows some of its soldiers to volunteer over there, and it it recognizes the papers that they issue, the driver's license and passports. It recognizes them for travel in Russia. And another interesting thing I found out is that these what are they, Javelin anti-tank weapons? Mm-hmm. Ambassador Volker, remember him who gave testimony? Yeah, Ambassador Volker was under a special waiver at the Defense Department when he worked for the Defense Department. He was also a lobbyist for Raytheon, and they allowed him to wear both hats when he was in the Defense Department. And he's the one that pushed the Javelin missiles, which is produced by Raytheon, and they're not even being deployed to eastern Ukraine. They're being held in western Ukraine.
Yeah, they're not even going to the front lines. Yeah.
No.
By the way, he just passed away. That was
Volker did?
Yeah.
No, that was the head of the Federal Reserve, Paul Volker.
Oh, Paul Volker, yeah.
Yeah, the one that...
That's what I'm thinking of, yeah.
The one that tamped down on inflation.
Yeah. Volker is the ambassadorial... He was speaking before the United States.
The ambassador.
Yeah,
to
before the
Ukraine.
impeachment hearings, yeah.
So these facts about the military-industrial complex and their ties, Ukraine is to America. Ukraine is nothing more than a bargaining chip in our Cold War against Russia. We don't give a fig about the Ukraine, really. All this talk about democracy and freedom for the Ukrainian people.
Well, we really shouldn't. I mean, it's not our.
I know it
it's
isn't.
not our ballywick.
Exactly. We'd have no business being involved.
Yeah, if they their destiny is their own, and we should stay out of it.
Exactly. And that would benefit everybody if we did that, just like it would benefit everybody if we got out of Syria and out of Afghanistan.
But if that began a trend, the trend would be that most of the entangling alliances that have happened over the last 2 centuries or so would cease to exist. And we'd go back to being a global design of about 10,000 countries.
Right.
And they couldn't manage them.
Yeah.
That's why they need their Novus, Ordos, and Quorum.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now, back to the show.
Hey, welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. This is your host, Brennan Trainer, and my co-host, Leland Faegre. And we have been seeing a lot of slimy politicians in the last couple of weeks. Week? Yeah, since last week came.
God.
But
therein lies the comedy, I'm telling you.
But one that we can admire has been on C-SPAN. I don't know if you've caught her, but she's doing small groups and houses. People just gathered together to talk with her in New Hampshire, which is the way to approach New Hampshire.
And that person would be?
Tulsi Gabbard.
Enter Tulsi.
And she says that she, even though she may qualify, she needs one more survey. And they already disqualified one of her surveys for bogus reasons, but she needs one more survey. But even though she may qualify, she's not going to participate in the next debate. She's going to stay with what she's doing in New Hampshire. And it was very refreshing to see her and listen to her speak in depth. For some of you out there, she reaffirmed her commitment to the Second Amendment, although she does say that there might be some legislation. She's not in the gun banning crowd, from what I can tell.
Well, even Scalia kind of left it open. I mean, I thought he shouldn't have done that, but so a lot of people have that apprehension about where this could go, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court has, been wishy-washy on taking any more gun cases.
But they've got one coming, don't they? They took one recently.
Yeah, I think they did, yes. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens there. But so we have to keep hoping that Tulsi gets a good showing in New Hampshire and keeps getting a little exposure, even though you have to look for her now. Did you see the Saturday Night Live?
I did not.
Take off on the debates?
No, I didn't. Was it good?
Yeah, it was pretty good, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But Tulsi was first, they only had her on twice. First time she was like they emphasized that she was in the that she had a strong, commanding presence, and all the candidates like Kamala Harris, she was actually scared of her, so that was good. But then the second take, they played off that white streak in her hair and made her seem like Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. So
Saturday Night Live. When is that on?
Saturday night.
Oh. Is it taped or is it?
Yeah, you can. I usually tape it. I think you can get it here at 11 o'clock or 11:30 or so.
Pacific time?
Comes up, yeah, Pacific time.
How about on the East Coast?
I guess it might be that they tape it. I don't know. I haven't watched it on the East Coast in a long time.
I think once upon a time you could actually watch East Coast broadcasts here on Pacific time, couldn't we? Is that still the case with dishes?
No, I don't think so.
Used to be you could do that.
Okay.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah. And then it's often on, they often have the best parts on YouTube because some of the skits are pretty poor, but then, you get to the...
Oh, it's not the same show.
Yeah, you get to the political skits, and they're usually quite good, they're a little less bashing of conservatives and a little more willing to bash the liberals now that the great god Hillary is gone. They're
she's
a little
coming back.
Yeah.
She's just waiting in the wings.
Yes, she's going to swoop in on the convention.
It's going to surprise a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But that Clinton machine is very powerful.
Yeah.
And if Her Highness wants in, she's coming in.
Well,
and it looks like she does want in. Mm-hmm. Because after all, she beat him the first time.
Oh yes. She's always ready to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always maintained that she was just waiting in the wings for an opportunity, and it looks like they've all just completely blown up. Mm-hmm. So why not? What's she got to lose? The
latest rumor is she's coming in because Bloomberg is in.
Well, I think he jumped in because he knew she was coming in. That's why he came in when he did. It was all about timing to see if he could get out ahead of her, because he knows damn well she's coming in.
So they're both Zionist fascists.
Yeah, no, there's nothing to. But no. It is a spectacle. It is an orchestrated spectacle, and it's a lot of fun to watch. I'm not sure what everybody else is watching, but that's what I'm watching.
Well, we didn't touch on the shooting at the Pensacola Naval Base, did we?
We didn't. There's another example of globalism that's not probably understood as globalism, but this idea of sharing our military services with foreign governments would be an entangling alliance.
Yep.
By definition. And look how well it worked out for us.
I wonder how nervous our pilots are going to be now when they when they have to train with the Saudis.
Well, they're now I hear they're insisting on being able to carry weapons on naval bases. I mean, I never heard of a military base where you don't carry weapons.
Oh, it's been in the news before. The shootout in Fort Hood, remember?
That was an example of one.
Yeah, yep. And so it's been discussed before. And then also weapons in the recruiting offices in the malls. There was a big brouhaha about that because they couldn't. The recruiting officers couldn't carry weapons.
It would like sending a message to law enforcement that they couldn't carry guns.
Right, which might not be a bad idea. I mean, a lot of countries have only the SWAT teams, basically what we would call a SWAT team, or the emergency responders carry guns. I mean, most British bobbies don't carry guns. Even in Russia, when you're in Moscow, most of the Moscow police don't carry guns. It's only if they have to call in for emergency help that those responders would carry guns.
I think it puts them at a disadvantage. I wouldn't be.
Well, they don't kill as many people that are a little bit nuts and are waving some kind of knife around or something. The first thing
you mean like my next door neighbor?
Yeah. In America, the first thing we do is shoot first and ask questions later, it seems, at times, right?
Well, there have been examples of that, sure.
Yeah.
There always are. But I don't think it's...
they seem to do a pretty good job of subduing people without having to use deadly force.
They did that last terrorist incident there on the London Bridge. Did you hear about that? Yeah, they got to him very quickly.
Oh, and it was the social justice warriors that invited that guy. They got that guy out of prison.
Right.
And invited him to the conference, and then he slits their throats.
Yep. Can't imagine. It's just beyond ironic. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah. But he was down. He was subdued. Remember the guy with the narwhal tusk and others subdued him? Mm-hmm. He was down on the ground, and the police apparently just shot him.
Yeah, they didn't give him any time to breathe.
Yep. Well,
gotta go.
Yep, like Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, Epstein didn't kill himself.
No, that's right. That's right. A lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah. But, it's like Bashar al-Assad said, sometimes you know too much, and these Western governments have people that know too much, and they have to be gotten rid of, and they can't be allowed to speak.
Well, I think Epstein was among those.
Yeah. And, that scandal, of course, keeps on metasizing, but is Ghislaine Maxwell finally being interviewed?
She apparently is going to consent to an interview where she's going to suggest that these women didn't happen. I think that's going to be her approach.
Right. Well, that's what Dershowitz, Richardson, and George Mitchell are saying.
I'm willing to bet that some of them didn't happen. But I'm also inclined to think that a lot of them did happen.
Yes, exactly.
It's a mixed bag there.
And Hillary and Bill were at the ranch in New Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. I heard about that.
They had their own little
and that's where the
village
prince,
compound.
That's where the prince was.
Yes, exactly. It had the 8-person party shower.
Yeah.
You heard about that?
Yeah, I did hear that. Through the grapevine, I did hear that.
Yes, yeah. And they didn't show it, but apparently if you went down the stairs, there was like a party room with a stripper's pole in it. And
no, I find that hard to believe. Now you've gone too far. What a world we're in.
Yes, and meanwhile, the poor, the average working girl who's doing this on her own is out, being
sullied by the whole thing.
Yeah, sullied by the whole thing, and also persecuted through the use of the law to attack the internet space where she could have a safe space. And a new study came out, in fact, that shows that not only are sex workers better off, but the population at large is better off with when you have allow these internet services and the women on them to advertise. It's not just sex workers that experience more violence when you take away their platform, but also women at large. Rapes go up in the general population. So that's another interesting point.
That seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Nothing unreasonable about
that. Yeah,
that.
the same thing, with porn. Study after study shows that pornography reduces violent rape, and yet, whenever the Republicans are in charge, somebody is going to try and do something about porn. I think there's a bill in Congress now. Hopefully, it won't get anywhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the culture. It's that side of the culture, Christianity and the like.
Yeah, well, Christianity doesn't have a sexual woman as a goddess like the pagans did, like the Osiris myths did, where the goddess redeems the male figure through sexual love, not just platonic love, which is Christianity's theme with the Virgin Mary and so on.
Yeah.
So it's causing problems.
Well, we all have a lot to learn.
Yes.
So join us again next week for another edition of Talking Truth to Power.